Namaste and good evening, everyone. Namaste, Sraddhalu.
Namaste. Welcome to everybody.
We are happy to continue today our exploration on the theme of Sanskrit language with a glimpse of the first mantra of the Rig Veda. But first, we will be taking some comments that we received, and we invite you to address more questions on this theme in the chat box during our conversation, or you may send beforehand an email at integralstudies.in@gmail.com. We have 3 comments and questions from Kriyas. Thanks again. These ideas are profound, very inspiring. I don't know yet how, but I intuitively perceive it's very important for me. Freni, can you please put the last mantra you mentioned of Pandiji in the description box? Or is there a book that one could buy? Kindly let me know. I'm very grateful for this amazing video. And from Vijis, dear sir, as you explained in the part of Saras Pranama, it was raining bliss here. The Vibhedini literally broke open and stayed the energy up the spine, if I pronounce correctly the
Yes,
terms.
yes. These three relate to the discussion last time, and particularly the recitation of the mantras from the sacred text that is called Lalita Sahasra Nama. Lalita is the Divine Mother as she plays in the universe. She is equally the Divine Mother who plays, who sports. And so there's a relationship with the Divine Shakti as not only a mother but also as an enjoyer, as a participant, and joyous play. That everything in the universe is part of her play and an expression of her play. The underlying is the bliss, the ananda, which is the purpose of the play and which expresses itself in the play. So Lalita, Sahasra is 1,000, Nama, 1,000 names of the Divine Mother, Lalita. So this is a very traditional, well-known text from which I recited those 3 verses which Panditji had taught. There is also a recording of his, and with that the little booklet from which I read was the translation of which was put together by our team here, Vasantiji and Sadhanaji. But this originally used to be out as a cassette, and it's been, since CDs and cassettes have faded out now, we will have a new edition of it which will come out next year. But just to tell you, the text itself is very traditional. And I want to comment on the Vigis who observes how there was this force of action. And this was my purpose, that you should be able to get a glimpse of how that thing operates. And I took that passage particularly because I find it extremely powerful, and the whole movement of this breaking of knots, ascending, and then the descent of the rain of bliss, presence, shower of force. And so I'm happy to read observation of Vigis. Also Kriyas's comment that the ideas are profound, but also there is this sense as if you're perceiving something intuitively which is very deep, and more deep than you can articulate with words or with your reasoning mind. And I'm happy to read this because this is in fact my intention in the way we are exploring the Sanskrit language. As I said before at the beginning, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar. My entry into the language itself is very superficial. At times I feel ashamed even that I'm speaking on a topic where I have such a, shallow entry. But I would still say I have a grasp of the underlying thing behind on a more intuitive level. And it is something of that which I am trying to transmit or express or share. I really wish I had a better grip and a more masterful entry into the language, which would have allowed drawing of many more examples easily and playing with many of the variations in which one could present some of these ideas. But unfortunately, I don't have that. We know one person who has that quite exceptionally in the approach that Sri Aurobindo offers us with the root sounds, and that is Dr. Sampadananda Mishra. He's quite an extraordinary person in this field and even in other things which he does. But I've read from some of his comments earlier, and I invited him to join us if he would accept on one of these discussions, and he has accepted to come on the 9th of November. That's 2 sessions from now. So the next session we will have further explorations of a certain kind, and the session after it will be a joint discussion with Sampadananda Mishra. And if you have any questions, some of the questions which you have sent I have kept for that, but if you have any specific questions based on what we have discussed which could be addressed to him, feel free to send that also. And probably that would be the last on the topic unless something significant comes up. But I want to highlight this, that if you feel that intuitive resonance, then I'm happy, because that's the objective of this sharing. We go to the next.
From Alexandra, Brahma, wow, we can feel the creation of the universe in this word. Amazing. Thank you, Sraddhalu. Thank you, Sri Aurobindo.
And Alexander has shared the breakup of the sounds. You will recall that Sri Aurobindo has this list of all the basic sounds and their psychological characteristics. So it was my intention actually to map it, but I focused more on the formation and the sound quality. But when you map it to Sri Aurobindo's description, the expression is even more complete, and Alexander has sent that in his email. So, and in his comment also that he makes. So he has written Brahma. If you break up now the B, Sri Aurobindo has described B as soft, strong, embracing, contact, possession, action. R, vibration, play. H, force. M, limitation, finality, completion. So we see in this sacred word, Alexander writes, the infinite emanating from itself through the embracing contact and act of possession, with pure vibration and divine play and force, to finally limit itself in a form. The infinite emanates the finite. And then he says, wow, we can feel the creation of the universe in this word. It's very interesting when you dwell in this way, especially with some of these words which have a great significance. And you literally get the feel of the power and force implicit in the word, and at the same time you feel the power and force behind which would give the word its meaning, and maybe even variations on the meaning. And this is that intuitive sense in which we can absorb the true underlying language and force of Sanskrit. We go to the next.
From Dwarka, the correct name to be used is Savitri mantra. Savitri related to Savitur, the sun god. Gayatri is the chandas meter in which this mantra is. It is such a humbling feeling for the practitioner of daily Sandhya Vandana, for example, Savitri mantra japa, to know that Sri Aurobindo named his epic poem as Savitri. Many thanks for this series, interesting and new perspectives into commonly seen things phenomenon. And from Ritu, what is the importance of Gayatri mantra provided by Sri Aurobindo?
Yes. So both these relate to the question last time on Gayatri and why Gayatri is considered to be the mother of the Vedas. What I said was somewhat, let's say, introductory, and Dwarka is giving us a elaboration on this, that the Savitri in Sanskrit would be the related to or of Savitra, in Sri Aurobindo's vocabulary, daughter of the sun. Savitra is the sun. And so in the Gayatri mantra itself, and this is specifically we are referring to Vishwamitra's Gayatri, there is this invocation to the light of the sun. And invoking that light Tat Savitur, that sun, whose light we invoke. May it illumine our intelligence. Such is the broad sense. And so he tells us that the correct name for the mantra should be not Gayatri mantra, but Savitri mantra, because it invokes the light of the sun. And yes, this is the point, because Gayatri is, as I mentioned last time, the meter, but at the same time, she is a deity. Each meter is a deity, and then each mantra is a deity. And this is one mantra where Gayatri is at once the meter and the deity, and so it's called Gayatri mantra more colloquially, but technically should be Savitri mantra because it is addressed to the sun, Savitra. And so I want to elaborate on this point, and because he has raised this question and this elaboration. And what he says is, as a practitioner of daily repetition of the mantra of Savitri and what is called the Gayatri, he feels humbled that Sri Aurobindo has named the poem Savitri. In the text of Savitri itself, in the introduction, Sri Aurobindo explains that Savitri here is the daughter of the sun. She is therefore the divine Shakti emerging from the divine truth that comes down, bridging the highest divine truth to the world in its most material. She incarnates in human form and becomes an expression of the divine grace at the same time to lift the human soul, and so on. So that's the sense of Savitri and if you continue that into the mantra, you get a very different sense. Interestingly though, Sri Aurobindo himself gives a Gayatri mantra, which is slightly different. It's almost like a variation upon this traditional Vishwamitra's Gayatri. And so Ritu's question of what is the importance of this? Is there a difference? Why is there a different mantra that Sri Aurobindo gives? But he also names it Gayatri mantra, not Savitri mantra. And the common feature of this term Gayatri mantra, any mantra in the rhythm, the chandas or the rhythm of the meter of Gayatri is often called a Gayatri mantra. So we have traditionally Rudra Gayatri, Lakshmi Gayatri, Vishnu Gayatri, various, and they're all Gayatris. So, and the Gayatri becomes reference to this, which is the Savitri mantra. So this is just to give a background which is more complex, but we will appreciate it in a different way, that Sri Aurobindo, when he gives the Gayatri mantra, and we call it Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri, there is a very specific purpose, and there is a very subtle but critical shift in focus. And for those who are interested, I would highly recommend this little booklet of my teacher M.P. Pandit, which is called Japa, and it's barely 47 pages, but in very condensed, concentrated form, it discusses the nature of the mantra practice. What is it that activates the power of the mantra? What makes it effective? And so on. He also gives there the meaning of the traditional Gayatri as well as a few other well-known mantras, including the very famous Mahamrityunjay mantra, which is used to protect from danger, including physical danger, and so on. And regarding the Gayatri, there is a whole section at the end where he discusses Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri. And in this, he gives the translation. See, in the traditional Gayatri of Vishwamitra, the focus is on the divine truth and invoking it to illumine the mind. Sri Aurobindo's Gayatri, with a slight shift, and I will only read the translation. Let us meditate on the most auspicious form of Savitra, the divine truth, on the light of the Supreme, which shall illumine us with the truth. This is Sri Aurobindo's own translation. So it illumines us, meaning the entire being. And you can see why this is important. At the time when that text or that mantra was expressed, it was at a stage of human evolution where the mind was emerging as a power in its own and being organized, stabilized, and developed to its full potential in preparation of an ascent beyond the mind into the intuitive, into the supermind eventually. So the first priority and in the formulation of the mantra was for that light to illumine the mind and to assist this evolutionary development. What we have now in the current evolutionary turn is, well, we have not yet gone beyond mind and we want to go into intuitive and supermind, and yet the nature of the sadhana, in particular the nature of the integral yoga, aims not only at that higher grade of consciousness but at its full descent, taking up the whole of our nature and transforming and divinizing our nature and life. So the purpose now of that luminosity of the divine truth, the light of the Supreme, is not just to illumine the mind but to illumine the whole being. And so this slight shift, there is a shift in the pattern of wording, the overall rhythm keeps the same Gayatri meter, but Sri Aurobindo has as if endowed it, empowered it with the force of his realization. You see, every rishi of a mantra, and rishi you must understand in its true sense of the word, one who sees the mantra, who receives and gives to form, becomes, so to say, the vehicle of the power that already exists, or of the spiritual experience that he receives and gives form to in the sound, in the words. So every rishi is as if transcribing or infusing into the very formulation the force of his experience of that. So here there's of course the breakup of the Sanskrit terms, I skipped that. And regarding this mantra, there is the explanation of the mantra and an elaboration that was written by Sri Kapali Shastriyar in Sanskrit, which was sent to Sri Aurobindo and approved by Sri Aurobindo. And then that was rendered freely into English by my teacher. So I read from that and you get a sense of the importance or the focus of this mantra, or the way Sri Aurobindo has articulated this mantra. So I read the translation from the Sanskrit into English. We meditate upon that light which is the best, the most auspicious form of the Supreme Person, Savitri, the Creator. That is His body, what is Prakriti in the higher hemisphere, accessible to yogic vision. That supreme splendor of Savitri shall illumine us, irradiate us with truth, with a constant state of being, inseparate from the supreme truth and its light. The attainment of the truth illumination here in the journey of our life through meditation on the splendor, the excellent form of the Supreme Creator, is thus posited. And so it goes. And then it ends like this. And this Gayatri comes to be acceptable here as in tune with the sadhana of the Mother, taught by our Venerable Lord. So also of this mantra, that Savitu, that light, that Savitu. The seer is Sri Aurobindo, the Supreme. The meter is Gayatri. The deity is the Supreme Light, the Mother. So very clearly the deity is separated from the meter. And Panditji elaborates in his writing subsequently how Savitri is the divine sun, the supramental sun, not the physical sun, and what that means, how that is reflected in the physical symbol. What is this truth sun? In the Veda it is described as the divine all-seeing eye, which becomes the basis later on for the Egyptian symbol of the Eye of Horus, which later is used by the various occult traditions in Europe, and particularly the Freemasons and so on. But the origin goes back to the Vedic conception. So it's quite a fascinating elaboration. And for those of you who are interested, I will highly recommend for you to read this in detail and dwell on the elaboration. So, about this, and the last part I will read, when he speaks of this invocation, she is the Divine Mother. She has brought into being all these systems of universes, and it is also she, the same light force, the Shakti, that sustains and builds them up in the mold of the intention of the Supreme Lord. Only she can fulfill that purpose in us. She also could relate us to the real truth of our existence and the Satyam, the truth, which each of our 1,000 movements struggles to express. Let us invoke her to awaken in us a consciousness responsive to her workings, and forge a living union of our aspiration with her will. Let us meditate upon her. And so thus we get a sense of how this mantra would be used as a means of support in the sadhana. And that light, and I skip again a portion, Panditji writes, it is the same light invoked in the mantra that is embodied in the person of the mother who initiates the movement of the yoga in the individual and leads it up to its crowning realization of the supramental illumination. Hence, it is meet that she is the deity of the mantra. And the mantra, charged as it is with the spiritual dynamics of its seer, Sri Aurobindo, the creator and impeller of the supramental life on earth, is a king idea that can link man's strength to a transcendent force. Line from Savitri. And so ensures the glorious fulfillment of the object of this yoga. So, I've put a link for Dipti Publications website where you can get the book. Here we get a sense of the distinction and also how, at the same time, how a mantra is used. Implicit is the deity and the dwelling on the deity, as a result of which one attains to the realization, immersion, oneness with the deity, and the power, the Shakti, the realization that the mantra represents becomes as if ours. I think we can go to the next question of Ritu.
Sanskrit language sessions are superb. Gratitude. Sanskrit language as a language is the best in every way. Would you please elaborate on some of these points? First, the awakened mantra provided by the holder who has acquired the whole partial realization power of that mantra is different from by non-awakened mantra. Second, is there any
Your voice is suddenly soft. Can you speak louder?
Yes. Is there any quality or any other difference due to language in awakening of words, mantras? As God says, let there be light, and the light appeared. How Shaktipat transferred the power to words, mantras?
So the question here is more about the general use of mantra itself, and in 3 questions she elaborates on the aspects of the questions. First is, what is this idea of an awakened mantra who has acquired a partial or whole realization, and how is this different from a non-awakened mantra? So it's precisely what I was speaking of earlier, that when there has been an identification with the power behind the mantra, then the person thus reciting the mantra is not repeating something learnt in memory by rote. He is expressing the mantra as if it comes from his own heart, emerging from his own experience. And therefore the words carry the force of the experience and can even help awaken another person to the same experience. And this is quite an important thing. And this is where you see the utility and the power of the mantra. The entire initial stage where you have learnt it by memory and then you repeat, dwelling on it, is only a mechanism for you to concentrate upon the theme or the deity of the mantra, and by dwelling in persistence, somehow build a bridge until you touch, hold, receive, infuse, and eventually acquire a partial or full experience. So, the utility of the mantra is only to the extent it gives you the experience. After that, it is in the expression of experience for which even the mantra becomes secondary. So, when certain people say that they have reached the culmination and realization of the mantra, you don't need to repeat anymore because the power is yours. Now you can either repeat the mantra to express that power specifically in that form, or simply exercise the power freely without those words of the mantra at all. So such would be the nature of this realization of the mantra. So in the second question she asks, is there any difference in the quality due to the language? Yes, in this case it can have, but even if not, even if you were to speak the same words in translated words, in a different language, if it is coming from some deeper experience that you already have, it would carry the same force. The language vibration may not express in the same way, but the transmission of the force would be the same. So you see this in many of the religious traditions. They may speak in English, but when the person with realization speaks, it has a mantric force and the result happens. So when God says, let there be light, it's a different thing. There the idea is the divine is the experience, is the word. It's not that the word is acquired, learnt, or an experience got. It is the word. And so it's not even the English words, let there be light, but the consciousness that says, I choose to become, and becomes. So the saying is no more of verbs of human sound, but the consciousness moving to expression. And so it is in this sense that even one can transmit, which comes to her third question, one can transmit a force, one can transmit a quality, one can transmit an experience, even just a pure energy, with or without words, sometimes with contact or without contact. So you will see this in the yogic tradition, the touch, blessing on the head, forehead, or the disciple placing head on the hands or the feet, and so on. But again, the physical contact is not needed. It is only a vehicle to link. Equally, the speech could become the vehicle to link, the mantra itself whispered in the ear or spoken aloud, or as a variant, simply a direct transmission of the energy and force, for which you do not need any of these external vehicles of contact. A lot depends on the nature of the experience in the person and their capacity to transmit. When the capacity is sufficiently developed, it can be done at a distance without the other person even knowing, which was the case when Sri Aurobindo used to lead his disciples by letter, sometimes at a distance. The letter could become a vehicle of the contact, but if the person was receptive enough, you didn't need any such means of contact. He would be conscious, holding the person in his consciousness, and directly transmit. But I will read from, in alignment with this question itself, I will read from, again, Panditji's book, where he describes what makes for the efficacy of the mantra. He says, there are certain conditions in which alone the japa of a name or a mantra produces the intended results. Japa means the repetition. If the japa is primarily based on the mind, then there must be a keen awareness of the import and the meaning of the mantra. So if you want to dwell in mind and you don't know the meaning of the mantra, you cannot put the meaning, the mental sense of it into the mantra. There should be, as it were, an understanding that stresses itself every time the mantra is repeated. Literally, you have to remember the sense and give to it the sense as you speak. If you notice this feeling, let's say you wish somebody good morning, and we'll use the good morning as a reference of mantra. Not the best example, but it's more accessible. You tell somebody, hi, good morning, good morning. It's just a sound. At best, implicit is a meaning and something goes or not at all. Or even sometimes you have the contrary feeling, I wish that fellow has a bad time today, but I have to say good morning. So I say good morning, but I throw very negative energy. But if now you concentrate, what do you mean by good morning? What do you really wish for the other person? Give form and meaning to that wish and say with affection, with that caring, I wish you a good morning. You see, already the natural sense of the emphasis has shifted. But into the emphasis, the meaning infused transmits the power, transmits the force. Catch this movement, and you'll find in any speech, any interaction, you can put more or less of what comes from you. If you're merely repeating what you read, it won't have that. If you have understood, held, and especially when you express an experience of yours, then so much more can come in. So this is what he's saying, you have to dwell on it every time the mantra is repeated. The sense of the deity or the nature of the truth that is invoked should be constantly held in the mind. Or, if the japa is done in the heart, there must be a strong feeling, an intensity accompanying the repetition. The japa should rise on the crest of deep emotion. So you feel the bhakti and you say, Divine Mother. And it's a call as if from your heart. You see, the mental content is relatively not so present. Now it could be certain mantras have both. The whole of the heart must beat in unison with the mantra, which thus gathers strength, acquires a fresh life in the individual, and in time begins to repeat itself spontaneously without effort. And I skip a few lines. He elaborates on the value of the faith. When repeated with such a faith for long, the mantra goes on creating vibrations which press upon the layers of the inner consciousness, till one day there comes a sudden opening and the truth ensouled in the mantra reveals itself to the being. So you see, in a very short, pithy description, such profound truths of practice and of understanding have just been compressed and condensed. So I would highly recommend this for those of you who really want to dwell on the sense of mantra. So having looked at these questions, there are a few other questions which relate to mantra we will keep for next time. I would like to move to the theme for today, which is extremely important. And again, I would like to highlight that the intention is for you to have a glimpse of the experience. And what we are taking here is the first Rik of the Rig Veda. So the mantras of the Rig Veda are known as Rig. And the Rig Veda is one of 4 Vedas. For those who may not be familiar with these terms, it has hymns. Each hymn has many verses. And the first hymn of the Rig Veda and the first verse of the first hymn is what we will dwell upon. Interestingly, I found these numbers. Rig Veda has 1,028 hymns, 10,600 verses, 153,825 words, and then interestingly, 432,000 akshara, we could say syllable or immovable sounds with variations of vowels. Interestingly, this number you will recognize immediately is the duration of the Kali Yuga. So it's almost as if literally each sound maps to a year, in a sense. So there are such interesting correlations which I mentioned before, and even rotational period of planets and so on. But that's not our goal. Our goal is now to dwell on this and get an intuitive sense of what the meaning of this first Rik is through the root sounds that Sri Aurobindo elaborates upon. Now what is interesting, Sri Aurobindo seems to have, because that was part of the work given to him to elaborate on this new science of language revealed to him by Sri Krishna. He has written many articles, he has written many what seem to be beginnings of books, he has done many translations, he has created his whole etymology structure, etc. But of all the things he has done, we find 14 different translations just of this first verse of the Rig Veda. 14 translations into English with some variations. And I will read a few later when we have studied the sounds. And he has made 10 detailed commentaries of just this one Rik, sometimes with the second and third Rik also. But 10 different times he has restarted and made a full commentary. with very different emphasis, different priorities sometimes, but 10 different commentaries, each of which is dwelling on the root sounds and doing a breakup of the sense of the Rik, the mantra, first verse, from the root sound outward. Sometimes elaborating on the philosophy behind even the sounds and the ideas and so on. So I've put several links which I would highly recommend for you to see. 3 of them I've put in which he dwells on the root sounds. There are many more, but I picked these 3. The third of them is the simplest, shortest, but the first 2 are also quite elaborate, where he compares with Greek, Latin and other words to show the root sense and how each sequence of the sounds combines. The third one is simplest for those who don't want to go too much into the technicality. In the shortest one, you will get the detailed idea. But there's another link in which he gives you the full Vedantic philosophy behind the Vedic worldview. And unless you understand that, he says you can't really fully appreciate the full sense even of this or the verses of the Veda. So we'll look at the text and then come back to the translation in its totality. Maybe first look at the translation to get a sense of the words. In Sanskrit, it goes, it is addressed to Agni. What loosely we say God of fire, but Agni is not God of fire, it's much more. So Agni. Agnimire purohitam yajnasya devam ritvijam hotaram ratnadhatamam. Just the first rik. Translated, Agni I adore, who stands before the Lord, the God who seeth truth, the warrior, strong disposer of delight. That's basic translation. Now we'll look at the etymology. And this is something so mind-blowing. You get a glimpse here of why the Veda is so valued and at the same time so difficult to cut through by the modern mind, and at the same time so simple in its potency and in its transmission of the spiritual experience. And it seems like a contradiction, but because we are thinking differently, we have to think with root sounds. So we come to this. Let me read from a portion. First word is Agni, fire. The stem is Agni, the root Ag, with the addition of N, combined with E. So Ag, N, E. He's going to break up now. The suffix N is nominal, adjective, verbal. It uses, like other such suffixes, the enclitics, e, u, to connect it with the root or with the termination or additional suffix or with both or neither. He's giving you general principles of the language. So even while he's expressing this, he's telling you the structure and the theory of how the whole thing works. So we go, I'll skip some of that. It was just to give you a glimpse of the kind of mastery he has. The root Ag is a secondary formation from the primary old Aryan A, which means essentially to be, or transitively to have. You be, you have. It's just a difference of this transitivity. A expresses being in its widest and barest sense, without any idea of substance or attribute. So now get yourself into this pure A sense, pure being, no idea of substance, no idea of attributes. And the verse begins with this, necessarily, isn't it? The whole Veda, Rig Veda, is beginning with this. Being in its widest, barest sense. From there it moves to Ga. The sound Ga suggests application, contact, or a gentle force or insistence. So what's happening? This pure existence moves to application, touches, gently insisting, pushing. Ag. The sound Ga suggests, combining with A, it gives the sense of being or having with an application of force to action, to men, to things, and easily acquires significance on the one hand of strength, force, excellence, preeminence, brilliance. This is one side. On the other, of gentle contact, love, possession. He gives examples from Latin and Greek. Illustrative derivatives from our Latin and Greek are go, to lead, drive, act, stir, move. Agaphos, I'm not sure if I can read correctly. Excellent, good. Or in Sanskrit, agre, foremost, in front. Greek, another word meaning top, extreme height, extreme limit, etc. He gives a series. Another word he uses from Greek, brilliant, love, prefer, possess, field. From Sanskrit, agasti, nasal, to make with the root, to stir, move, walk, beloved, anga, beloved, distinguished, and so on. And then, having given all these examples, I skip. The word Agni, therefore, means the strong, brilliant, mighty, and may always suggest, along with this, its proper signification as determined by usage, an allusion to its other possible sense of loving or lovable. Afterwards, it was confined to the sense of fire, Latin ignis. So, that's the first word of Agni. Now you get the sense of this Agni, and this is a deity. What is this deity? We could speak of this as the divine will, implicit, immanent, everywhere in cosmos. In all existence is this will gently pushing forward. So think of it in this way. In all that exists, that's the G, is the soft forward push, loving, brilliant, but gently, persistently pushing. This is the divine will immanent in all things. That is what we call Agni. As a conscious power, it is a cosmic deity. And so the god Agni. In the material domain, this emerging, expressing itself in material process is most visibly felt in the fire process. Therefore, Agni term is used to describe fire also. But fire does not include all of Agni. Agni includes fire among other things. There's a whole book, I think, written by David Frawley, where he described in the physical world all the different kinds of fire, including volcanic fire, electric fire, etc., and as if linked them all to the underlying sense of Agni. It would still be a reductionist idea, because Agni includes not just in the physical world, but all the worlds, the divine will pushing. But if you have from emerging out of existence, all existence, this gentle push, suggests also something else to you in the very movement. The intuitive feel of it not only is pushing, it's carrying, it's lovingly carrying, it's sustaining, even nourishing. So all these become functions of Agni. When we read Sri Aurobindo's commentary on Agni as a god, you'll find all these kinds of functions operational. But all the functions are held, if you see, in the intuitive feel of this Agni. The next word is Ide, which in the translation was we adore. Why Agni we adore? And that will come in the third word, he stands before the Lord. So it is this gentle push. Translated in our individual psychological terms, it would be the fire of the psychic being, or the aspiration of the psychic being, which is always pushing forward, lovingly turning to the Lord, approaching, seeking, yearning for the Lord. And so it is Agni that we adore, who stands before the Lord, who leads us to the Lord, who is the driver of the journey. You see, all this is implicit in the vibration, in the sound itself, in the language roots. So we come to the next word, Ire. And he explains how the variation of R, L, D, Il, Ir, Id, etc. I skip the more technical descriptions. The root Il is a secondary formation from the primary root I. E, which means essentially to be in relation to something, person, time, or direction. All these are the variations of the relation: thing, person, time, direction. So, as a consequence, to go, drive, press towards, master, study, approach, etc. And also means to produce, arise, come into being, as opposed to the idea of the idea of of static existence. So the of Agni is static existence. The of the ile is this coming into being, arising. There's a dynamic aspect to it because of the relation aspect. Il. The sound L is the shabda sound of love, desire, entreaty, gentle and wooing touch. You see in English, love, like, etc. It expresses softness, sweetness, desire. And by development, you intensify now, passion, intensity, force of the heart. Combining with E, now you have E and L, he has dwelt on. Combining with E, it gives the sense of close adherence, to embrace, cling. See now the relation with the love. See, this is also a very interesting exercise in psychological awareness and nuances of experience. You have this experience of relation, you have this experience of soft love, desire. What happens when these two blend in the part of consciousness where they join? It's fascinating even to observe and recognize how these movements work in us. So, combining with E, it gives the sense of close adherence, to embrace, cling to, love, adore, approach with love or adoration. Of pressure, to crowd, press, pack, press together, make compact or strong. Of maternal production, see, you're pressing to nourish. Of maternal production, motherhood, to bear, produce, give birth to. So, il, and from this you will find all these words would derive subsequently. It has also the primary sense of motion, to go, move, cast, strike. And by development from the sense of clinging or persistence in a given place, the opposite idea of motionlessness, rest, to rest still, lie, sleep. So there is the opposition from there. Its derivatives are ila, meaning mother. In the Vedic deity, ila is the divine mother. And applied to the earth ila, cow, ila. So now you see why, if this word is used, it could easily be translated into any of these directions by identifying with objects, but then losing the psychological sense. Speech, ilika, earth, ilika, earth, ili, a short sword or stick. Id having the same meaning, also meaning of libation, offering, heaven, place of bliss, love, delight. Id also means people or subjects from another sense, to control, master, rule. Ish comes from that. Idah is an epithet of Agni. Ida, love, desire, prayer or praise. Idanam, adoration. Idya, adorable. Greek derivatives. Iradov, in a close throng, pressed together. Crowd, troop, assemble, stronghold, fortification. You see the movement of that pressing. So, Agnim, ire. The word here means not to praise or hymn as taken by the commentators and European, but to love, desire, adore, as is evident from the use of idya in a later verse. So you see the commonality of the sense of a word across verses. Sri Aurobindo uses to show that the sound sense is consistent across different usages. Unlike Sayana, who is the last great famous commentator on the Veda, who tries to go to root sounds also but does not go deep enough, he gives different meanings to the same word or the same sound at different places. According to context, he changes completely the meaning. And sometimes even it doesn't make sense. It's almost like you have to guess. It doesn't make sense. Sri Aurobindo shows that if you go to the root sounds, and the meaning from root sounds is consistent everywhere. So, to love, desire, adore. As so, next we come to the Agnim Ire. Agni we adore. Purohitam. Now, Purohitam, if you read the modern translations, Purohitam is priest. So they will say Agnim we adore or we like, who is the priest of the fire. Does make sense. Agni is the fire, you say, and he is the priest who puts things in the fire. Doesn't make sense. And this Sri Aurobindo points to. And yet, for literally hundreds of years, across so many different traditions, even in the Vedic teachings, they say, Agni is the priest. Because Purohitam is priest. How does Purohitam become priest? Well, it's in the modern usage. And now Sri Aurobindo takes us into the etymology and we discover why it became priest later. But what does it really mean? So Puro, Hitam are two words, not one. Puro, in front. Puraha meaning door, gate, wall, front. Then city or house. In Greek, I can't read the sound, gate, walled fort or town. If you look at the modern British names, you have to go all the way to England and you'll find this is true. Everywhere you go, you have these names of places which end with Bara. You pronounce it Bara, you write Bourgh. Now it's strange, why do you write it this way, pronounce this way, but what you see is Bara is a distortion of Pura, city, town. But why is Pura city? Even in India now everything is called Pura. If you see all the cities, what's the famous name? Vedapuri was one of the names of Pondicherry in the old days, city of Veda. But why Pura? Why Bara? The sense of in front gets extended then to walls. A wall that binds or separates a distinctive area becomes a house, fort or city, town. So, Bara. All the names you'll find are something Bara. If you try to go back to the original sense in the British tradition, you cannot find anything meaningful. Of course, you go back to the Greek at best, but that's about it. So now he says pu, the nominal suffix ra in the front, in the sense of cover, protect, common to the primary p roots as in pa, pata, pa, pal, pati, pus, originally husband, protector, then male, puns. Interesting. Puman, putam, cup, sheath, covering, push, to protect, nourish, pitaha, roof, house, basket, etc. So, Pura, meaning who stands. Pura means meaning in front. Hitam, we go to the etymology. And he says it means fixed, stationed, put. He, the sound, adjectival suffix ta, in the sense of to cast, throw down, strike in, fix, plant, common to primary root ha. So in another of the, as I told you, he has got several variations on this where he describes similarly. There's another place where he describes who, the sound ha, who, push with force, and hitam, planting, station, firmly, fixing, forcefully present. So in front, fixed, standing. So Purohitam means him who stands before or in front, and was afterwards applied to the Purahita or chief priest of the sacrifice. So now you see how this became by derivation the priest who is standing in front. So you can't approach the deity, you ask somebody who is more pure or more skilled or more capable, and he becomes the priest, therefore mediating on your behalf. So he stands in front of God, that is Purohitam. And so by extension it becomes priest. But Agni is standing in front of priest of what? See, if you're having a sacrificial fire, you can't say fire is the priest. It doesn't make sense. But if you say fire is standing in front of who? And the next word is yajnasya. Root is yaj with nominal suffix na. Yaj is a derivative from the primary root ya, which has the essential significance of motion to and from, yearning, contact, union. The sound j adds to it the idea of sharply applied and decisive or effective force in the motion, desire or contact. So, yaj. Ya, motion, yearning, contact, union, and j adding this decisive effective force to the motion, desire and contact. Yaj. Hence it gets the meaning of effort, seeking after, wooing, application to, adhesion, or strongly maintained union or contact. It shows many words which derive from this. The sense of successful effort gives that of mastery. So when you do this, you persist in this, you gain mastery. So yam, yat, yas, it means in its nominal labor, action, control, mastery, yoga. When used transitively, ruler, master, yogin. The word yama has the same significance. So you see in the yoga tradition, yama and niyama. Yama, you say, is the things you do, the mastery that you have in control. You do or you don't do, so yama or niyama. But the yam is the common aspect here, which is this maintaining strongly union, contact, adhesion. You cling to this, follow this, persist in this. And by that again, Yama as god of death. You see, and you would say, why would you have Yama, god of death? Because he is the law. He binds, he holds, he compels things into that whatever requirement. He is the iron law imposing. In another sense, to cast before, hand over to, yacha. It means to give, offer, sacrifice. So I skip a lot. Yajna therefore means either the master, the Almighty, the Lord, Vishnu, Ishvara. Ishvara, Isha is again approaching the same but from a different perspective. We'll touch upon that later. Or action or yoga or sacrifice. Now think about it in a more deep way, as if all three blend into each other. All three senses have to be taken into consideration in the Veda. Here and ordinarily it means Ishvara, the Lord. So in the Isha Upanishad, you will remember Sri Aurobindo goes to the etymology of Ish, is and the Lord who enjoys. And he owns, he possesses first. Isha is the possessor. And what is the goal of possession? He says possession and enjoyment. So it is he who inhabits the world, possesses the world from inside and enjoys. So lordship, but in the sense of possession and enjoyment. That becomes Isha, Ishvara, and the Lord. So Yajna in this case is at the same time the sense of the Master, the Almighty, the Divine Lord, as well as the action of the Almighty and the union, joining in that action, bringing together in that action, uniting, and the movement of the sacrifice. So sacrifice is, of course, the English sense is a bit clouded. We'll come to a commentary we will read of Sri Aurobindo where he elaborates on this a little bit, but you get the sense now. And yoga is implicit in this. The master of the yoga, the one who does the yoga, who is master at the same time in his action is yoga. Hold this idea. So Agni we adore, who stands before the Lord, who is the master. Then it describes Agni. Why do we adore Agni? He stands before the Lord, but then what else is he doing? Or why is he standing before the Lord? Why is he important to us? So the next word is Devam. root div, compounded after modification with a, which gives simply vaguely the sense of being, but div has two common senses: to play or sport and to shine. Besides some of the significances common to the root, to strike, throw, hurt, cause, suffer, harass, destroy, we had seen those examples. Squander or give, dana. The sense to play, gamble, sport, gambol, rejoice, is its most characteristic significance. The sense of shining comes from the sense of coruscation, brilliance caused by light playing brilliantly. So when light plays, you have this intensity of the shining, vibrating powerfully. Div. The gods are therefore primarily those who rejoice, to whom life is a play, lila or ananda. Their occupations being described by the expression, it gives a Sanskrit term meaning the divine players are the gods. Deva subsequently came to have the sense luminous or flashingly brilliant attached to it. Also heavenly, from Div, the shining and blissful regions. So the higher worlds are Div. And was used in the ancient language in all these senses, the associations of which have come down to us in the modern sense of Deva, which will reductionist translation is gods. The gods are the light beings, I'm using the Sanskrit word now, Jyotirmaya, full of light beings, and the Tejomaya, intensity, of the nature of intensity of luminosity, luminous in the domains of the moon and the sun, I am translating loosely, the two heavens attainable by mortals. So, Agni is described as Devam, light being, luminosity, intensity of luminosity, being of that domain, but also itself a brilliant, powerfully vibrating play of light. Okay. Now you see how this also corresponds to a description of Agni as fire, isn't it? You get there the sense of luminosity, the play, it's always dancing. If you observe a fire, it's always changing, dancing. It's having fun. I don't know if you have ever had this experience. Just sit before a fire and watch, but it has to be a real fire with wood. You watch, and after a while, you begin to feel as if the fire is conscious. And it's having great fun taking this substance of wood and transforming it and playing around, dancing, playing, and sometimes here, sometimes there, combining, building new movements, joining them, breaking apart. It's playing, but a luminous, intense heat of play, luminosity and heat. So tapas is tejas is the luminosity heat combination. So Agni we adore, who stands before the Lord of yoga. Devam, luminous being, player. And then Ritvijam is the next word. Here it says a compound word, Rit and Wij. Interesting, you see, and just read a little to give you a sense of his mastery. An ancient compound word, Rit and Wij, formed in the early childhood of the language before the modern laws of Sandhi were applied. Sandhi is the rules for joining sounds. So these rules are later, he is telling you. Earlier it was much simpler. Rit is the root R with the verbal nominal suffix th, expressing either action or quality. R signifies essentially to move or go vibratingly straight or swift to a mark. It means to go straight, to attempt, attack, reach, acquire, master, know, think. Hence various meanings of its derivatives. Riktham, acquisition, wealth. Ridh, to flourish, prosper. Riddhi, rishti, weapon, sword. Rikna, wounded, etc. But the common meaning is based on the idea of straightness, fixity, directness, truth, knowledge, as in Riju, Ritam. Ritam is truth, law, rule. Ritu, fixed time, seasonal, order, rule. Rishi, knower, thinker. Latin, reor, I think, ratio, reason, etc. Rishu, wise, adept, expert. The word rit here means truth or law. So, rit, wij. The rit here means truth or law. But you see, what is truth? This straight, direct, reaching, holding, acquiring, fullness of wealth implicit in that. So, going straight, mastering, knowing, reaching. Fixity, directness, truth, knowledge. What is untruth? Going crooked, not straight. Isn't it? Instead of going here, you go off track, or you zigzag, or you wander around, but you don't go to the center directly. So the second word, wij, rit, wij, we'll see. Rit as truth or law, wij, is derivative from the primary root vi, which has the significance of coming into existence, to appear, open, separate, discern. These meanings can be traced through a host of derivatives in Sanskrit, Latin and Tamil. From the sense of appearing, being open, we get transitively the meaning to see, to know. Latin, video. We spoke of this. Tamil, vilanga, to give light, shine. Viri, eye. Sanskrit, vid. The form wij implies successive, decisive, complete, or spontaneous sight or knowledge. Ritvij is therefore the knower of truth, the seer, drashta of the Veda. So, we are praising Agni as being Ritvij. He is the knower of truth. Rit, the truth. Wij, knower. Ritvij, knower of truth. But catch the underlying sense. Directly knowing truth. Truth is as if inherent. You don't have to go or do. You are there. You reach it. You possess it, but directly. No distortions. No indirections. No reflections. Therefore, we get the sense Agni Jata Vedas. Born with knowledge. He has always the knowledge from the beginning. Or the adept in law and rule. In the latter sense, it came to mean a sacrificial priest, versed in the rules of the sacrifice. So this fellow knows all the rules, so you extend this Ritvij to actually describe as priest. The later etymology, Nirukta, fixing on the sense of priesthood, and only one then known, very naturally derived it from Ritu and Ij, sacrificing in season. So one who sacrifices seasonally. You see how both words have been reduced to a secondary sense and then combined to form a secondary or even a distorted meaning. But it could hold. The sound would still carry that, but it would be secondary. In the Veda, it is the most direct meaning, highest, most essential. Then the next word, Agni, is described as Hotaram. So we get to the sound hu. Root hu after modification with the verbal termination tr. The essential significance of her roots, ha, he, hu, is violent contact, movement, application of force. Their primary meanings are to strike, dash, hit, destroy, slay. See, everywhere you have this forcefulness. Then to cast, throw, hurl, fling. Then to hurl forth the voice, shout, call. The sense of abandonment, the sense of casting a libation on the altar. The other derivative senses are of later origin. Hota in the old Aryan tongue means a slayer, striker, destroyer, warrior. Havaha and ahavaha meant slaughter, battle, war. Havi, slaying, strife. Hu, to hurl, fight, shout, call, invoke assistance. And again, you get one of these brilliant insights. He says the sacrificial application is of later origin and belongs to the Dwapar Yuga, the age of sacrifice and ceremonial. So it's as if in the original period of the Vedic age, which is the Satya Yuga, the sense was closer to the truth of things. As the ages transition and there is a mood of the age, and in the Dwapar Yuga particularly, the external form, ritualism, clinging to things by processes becomes dominant, and so everything is now understood in its terms. You get here a brilliant example of how the Sanskrit language in its root structures can hold an essential truth that can reflect on different planes or different states of consciousness with an equivalent sense relevant to that state, but which still is a reduction from that old, from that essential, pure. When you become more mentalized, the meaning also mentalizes and reduces. When you rise back into the more intuitive state, you can actually hold the intuitive sense of these sounds and the meaning of the verse in its pure intuitive sense. And it is towards this that I want you to dwell. And we come to the last word of the verse. Ratna Dhatamam. Ratna and Dha with superlative termination tam, the greatest, the most. Ratna Dha. So what is Ratna? The word Ratna is the word Rat with adjectival nominal Na, expressing quality or substance. The root is Ra, which has its essential significance, vibration, swift repeated action, tremulous, eager or impetuous contact, shock or motion, and its characteristic significance to play, enjoy, sport, take delight, to love, embrace, etc. Also to shine, coruscate, shed luster. It and its derivatives also mean to rule, govern, protect, to fight, attack, set to begin, move rapidly, shout loud, make noise. The word Rath had several of these meanings, but chiefly delight, enjoyment, love, sexual pleasure, passion, luster, brilliance, and Ratna therefore meaning delightful, brilliant, and a noun of delight, Ananda or luster. So Ratna, you see, those who are familiar, the word Ratna is also used for jewels, so pearls or jewels generally. And so what is that? The luster of it, or the delight of possessing it or owning it. It could take various forms depending on, but the luster might be the predominant thing, and the enjoyment of that wealth might be secondary aspect of it. It is in later Sanskrit that it took the sense of jewel from the adjectival sense brilliant. Dha is the root dha, to arrange, place, dispose, used in an adjective or noun. Ratna dha therefore means disposer of delight. The word disposer you may not get the full sense. So arranger, placer. So disposing is placing, arranging, not throwing away. Placing, arranging correctly. So Ratna Dha, who is the disposer or arranger of delight. Ratna Dhatamam, the greatest, mightiest, most powerful arranger of delight. So now we have completed the first rik. He continues in this way through the rest. Let's go back to the sounds. Agni. Remember the sense of Agni. Existence, and gently pushing forward, lovingly pushing forward the divine will to Agni. Agnim, Ire, we adore. So the sense of love. Remember, with all the variations which came with it, also the mothering sense, place of love and delight, etc. So here it is not praise, but it is to love, desire and adore. Agnim, Ire, this impulse of the divine will pushing forward in everything, including in us. So at the same time, the verse applies to an individual evolution of the divine will pushing, aspiration pushing, that we adore. But also you can see it as a cosmic deity operating everywhere in the universe, and this divine impulse of divine will pushing everything forward, we adore. And since there is nothing in the verse to distinguish between the two, and this would be the nature of the Veda, if it means both or more, both are implicit. You may by choice limit to one or other according to your temperament or need at that moment. But the full sense in the intuitive consciousness will be this, which includes everything. The individual is after all one with the whole, or is a macrocosm, a replication of the whole. So it doesn't matter too much. So you see, the whole philosophy and even the nature of the yoga is implicit in the deeper understanding which is most complete. So Agni, we adore. Agnim ire Purohitam, who stands in front, but with force. And standing in front mediating, but forcefully, strongly, intensely. Purohitam, of who? Yajnasya. So Yaj, remember, the divine, almighty, master, Ishvara, Lord, but he's also Lord of yoga, implicit, master of the sacrifice. This word sacrifice we have to understand in terms of things flowing into the divine. Emerging from the divine, flowing into the divine. So the deepest sense of sacrifice which we have described in the Bhagavad Gita, it says Brahman, the one, is the one who is offering, who is the offering itself, and who pours into Brahman itself, is the goal, the culmination of the offering, in the act which is itself him. And thus one who dwells on this inevitably merges into this. And here is again a profound yogic principle, practice, insight, that if you dwell on the idea that all is emerging out of the oneness of the divine, moves in oneness of divine, by oneness of divine, is a movement of the oneness, and eventually merges into the oneness of the divine, led by the divine. Dwell on this idea, first in mind and then later in perception. Observe this even in an observation. It can be a very mental and sensory observation, but try to hold a more intuitive poise. Observe the movements in nature. For example, a seed takes the soil, draws from it, builds the tree. The tree is nothing but the soil now expressed as life, substance, which then become fruit, flower, leaf, which then eventually falls and is reabsorbed into soil, or is eaten by an animal and then eventually reabsorbed into soil. But underlying the sense of oneness out of which emerges, into which it flows, even as it flows as tree, it is still held in the oneness, nourished by the oneness. The sunlight is the oneness, the air, the water are expressions of the oneness. They all come from the oneness, flow into this and merge back into oneness. And when you dwell in this way, your consciousness inevitably finds this immersion in the divine oneness. This is the deeper sense of the sacrifice. So when we speak of Yajna as the Lord, the yoga and the sacrifice, it is he who is in this movement. And this movement is the evolution, is the yoga. Now all this I am not constructing, it is there in a different text of Sri Aurobindo. All these ideas are there, I am just combining because this text he stopped with this much. That's why he has variations. Look at many of them. Like I said, there are 10 I think in this case, with different emphasis, elaborating on different aspects. And so, Agni, this divine will, impulse, lovingly pushing forward, we adore, express our love, affection, give ourselves, yearn for, who stands in front with strength, force, before this gigantic divine presence, divine flow, divine action, lordship, and the yoga and sacrifice of the divine manifestation. He stands before that, Yajna. This is Vishnu, Ishvara, the Lord. Agni we adore, who stands before the Lord. Devam, the luminosity, the heat, the tapas, the light, the intensity, but the play, brilliantly playing. This divine will working, brilliantly playing everywhere, forming things, working, but always an expression of the bliss or yearning for the bliss or deriving from the bliss. His home is in the bliss and he is leading you towards the bliss. All this is implicit in the nature of this div. You see, Devam. So Agni now as Devam is his home, and this is again from the Veda. He is approaching his own home, which is in the worlds of bliss of Sachidananda. But here when he plays, he is still Devam. He still knows that bliss. He still knows the play. He still expresses it in his play, in the dance of the fire, in the play of the will, working through things. And that's why he's a strong disposer of the bliss. And then Ritvijam, who knows Ritu, the direct, straight truth, who knows the truth directly, inherently, is born with the truth, the law. So again, the law is for us a very mental idea, something imposed from outside. But here the sense of law is innate law. That which is true inevitably must flow by its truth. That's the sense of law. It is this flowing movement of the truth, not the truth itself, but the flowing movement of the truth, which in the Chinese tradition becomes the Tao. Tao, Tao. They don't have this underlying truth, but the truth as flow. So it's not dharma. It is this ritam, which is Tao. Many people say dharma is Tao. No, it's not. Dharma is a different thing. It is the upholding principle truth. It's the flow of this in the rhythm of truth and law and unfolding of self-existent truth, natural law. In Buddhism, they reduce it to natural law. In the Tao, you have the same idea. Things have a natural law, natural rhythm. You align with that. So, Rit Vij, who knows this natural rhythm and law of things. Why? Because he is the divine will inside everything, isn't it? Inside us equally. He knows our true nature and our divine nature. And so from within, as he moves out and expresses and stands before the Lord and leads you to the Lord with his play, delight, he knows the truth and leads you to the truth by his working within you, and therefore we yearn for and we love him preeminently above all else, above all the other deities. The knower of truth, the seer of the Veda, who's born with the knowledge of the truth. It's not like he has to gain it, it is already within him. Rit Vijam, Ritu Vijam. And the next word, Hotaram, warrior, remember? This is the warrior, strong, forceful warrior. He doesn't say here exactly what he is fighting or destroying, but we will take it from another text. Well, destroyer of darkness. He breaks any opposition, resistance, darkness, leads you because he is a warrior. Cuts through everything, every obstacle, removes all obstacles by destruction. So the Hotaram and the force of the Hu in Hotaram. And the last, Ratna Dhatamam. Ratna, this play of light, love, enjoyment, brilliance. But Dhatamam, Dha, arranging, organizing perfectly, and in the best way, the one who can best do it. What is he arranging? This joy, delight, ananda of the divine. Why? Because he already knows the truth and he arranges it. Now if you see these last three words, Agnim we adore, who stands before the Lord, and after that Agnimire Purohitam Yajnasya Devam, and then Ritvijam Hotaram Ratnadhatamam. If you look at these four terms, you'll find here very interestingly, and it's just a dwelling in the idea, the sequence of the Sat-Chit Ananda in its aspect of knowledge. He knows, he is born with the knowledge, isn't it? In the Ritvij, Hotaram is the force, power aspect, breaking obstacles, taking you inevitably to the goal, and distributing, organizing the delight of the divine, the bliss. Knowledge, power, and the bliss. And underlying that, Agni himself emerges as the divine will from the divine existence. So, if you trace back like this, you find something so profound. It's difficult now to translate it into mental words. Just catch the full sense of it. From the Satchidananda, which is his home, as he flows, Agnim we adore, who stands before the Lord, who is doing this gigantic movement of the manifestation, the sacrifice, the yoga, and enjoyer as the divine enjoyer, stands before that, mediates, leads us to that. Why? Because he is this light, he knows the domain of the bliss, but himself is light and intensity. Deva, Div, Deva, play, in the play, luminosity of in the play. Who knows the truth directly, who by force removes obstacles, leads you to that, to the divine, to the fulfillment, and most eminently, most perfectly, most completely organizes the divine bliss. Catch the whole movement into it. Agni we adore, firmly planted before the Lord, mediating, leading us to the Lord. And what is the Lord? This gigantic movement. It's not Lord as static, Lord in manifestation and in the yoga, unfolding creation, but divinity. Light being who knows the play of the luminosity, who is the play of luminosity, plays in luminosity, always clear seeing, knows the knowledge directly, is born with the knowledge, is exactly what is needed in the right rhythms perfectly. Doesn't have to never makes a mistake. Takes you by the direct path, no crookedness. He removes crookedness forcefully and arranges, organizing the divine delight. Agnimire purohitam yajnasya devam ritvijam hotaram ratnadhatamam. Agni I adore, who stands before the Lord, the God who seeth truth, the warrior, strong disposer of delight. This is how loosely Sri Aurobindo has rendered it. There are variations to Sri Aurobindo's translation. As I said, he makes 14 translations. So one variation is, Agni the brilliant I adore, who standeth before the Lord, the God that has the ecstasy of the truth, the fighter that fulfilleth utter bliss. I see here there's a complete shift in the emphasis. But in the pure Sanskrit root, all this is included. The problem is when you come into the English language, all the words get reduced to something narrow. So will I use this word? Will I use that word? Will I use the other? Actually, all of them are true at the same time, but the language cannot carry this fullness and richness of meaning. So necessarily in the English it gets reduced. So you have 2 or 3 variations of translation. And Sri Aurobindo is as if trying to see how to most completely express this. And when he does express completely, it becomes an entire article, Agni. I did not put the link to that. I will add it shortly within the next hour or so. But take a look at that for those who want to really dwell in meditation on who is Agni, this deity. And it's a beautiful experience when you read that article. Again, another translation. Agni I desire, who standeth before the Lord, the God who knoweth all the law, the warrior who disposeth utterly delight. So again, shift in shades of meaning with the same force. Another, Agni I adore, who stands before Yajna, the God that sees right, the offerer of the oblation, the chief disposer of delight. And one more which I will read from. The God will, see, so far it was Agni. What is Agni? The God will I seek with adoration. Divine priest of the sacrifice, who is set in front and sacrifices in the seasons of the law, giver of oblation, who most ordains the ecstasy. Shift in emphasis, shift in formulation. In English language, necessarily you can only do so much. Otherwise it becomes very, very long, because if you elaborate on each of these. So there are other variations Sri Aurobindo has written which play with this. Contrast this with the modern translation, and I just picked this from somebody from the internet, doesn't matter who it is. I glorify Agni, the high priest of the sacrifice, the divine, the ministrant, who presents the oblation to the gods and is possessor of great wealth. The whole thing flattens out. Even worse, we have the 1896 translation of Ralph Griffith. And you see what a mess it would have created for people who read at that time. I laud Agni, the chosen priest, God, minister of sacrifice, the Hotar, lavishest of wealth. So certainly this fellow is chosen priest, he is God, he is minister of the sacrifice, he is the Hotar, it's not said what it is, and he lavishes wealth. You see how the whole sense has been reduced to, oh, we want wealth, it's a priest. It's reduced to the Western context of the religious ritualism of the church and so on. The sense is completely lost. But even then, if you stay with the English translations, you feel the reductionism. And we'll make one last step to go back. I wanted to read another. Let's just take a moment. We'll read one more. So this is a longer text which he elaborates on this, and I will read from this. After translating the first Rig in the way we already read, Sri Aurobindo writes, so the Rig Veda begins with a song to Agni, with the adoration of the pure, mighty and brilliant God. Agni, he who excels and is mighty, cries the seer, him I adore. Then Sri Aurobindo asks, why Agni before all other gods? Because it is he that stands before Yajna, the master of things. Because he is the God whose burning eyes can gaze straight at the truth, the Satyam, the Vijnanam, the supermind. That which is the seer's aim and desire, and the thing on which all Veda is based. So the whole Veda is finally all about this realization of the supramental and the Satchidananda. Because he is the warrior who wars down and removes all the crooked attractions of ignorance and desire, who stands in the way of which stand in the way of the yogin, because as the vehicle of tapas, the heat of concentration, the pure divine energy which flows from the higher concealed hemispheres of existence, that is Agni is the vehicle of tapas, he more than any develops and disposes Ananda, the divine delight. Again, this word dispose, Sri Aurobindo uses in the original English sense. Today, dispose is all about throwing away. Here, dispose is placing rightly, arranging. So, just remind yourself of the sense of this word. Now, he's given you a reason what this is all, the whole description. Already you see the translation needs this kind of an elaboration. Then he goes into a whole description of this rationale behind why is the divine described as yajna and so on. Who are the deities, how the whole thing operates, the battle between the beings of light and the beings of darkness, the coverers, the stealers are the beings of darkness. So I skipped that. But I've left you the link for those who would really like to go into that. I'll skip this. We go to one more. Okay. I'm going to read a portion of this. It's another article. Agni is a devata, light player, we can say. One of the most brilliant and powerful of the masters of the intelligent mind. Man, according to Vedic psychology, consists of 7 principles in which Atman, self, cases itself. So self has taken on these 7 layers. We know only the lower 3 of the 7. Gross matter, Annam, gross matter, Pranam, vital energy, Manas, intelligent mind, Vijnanam, ideal mind, Ananda, pure or essential bliss, Chit, pure or essential awareness, Sat, pure or essential being. 7 layers. In the present stage of our evolution, ordinary humanity has developed Annam, Prana, Manas, physical, vital, mental, for habitual use. And well-developed men are able to use with power the Vijnanam, acting not in its own habitation, Sve, the May of the Veda, nor in its own Rupa, Vijnanam, not in its own form, but in the mind as reasoning faculty, Buddhi. So here's a brilliant insight. 7 principles, and all 7 are within the 7. So if you enter the mind, you have 7 principles reflected inside mind. So the Vijnanam which we aim at, when it organizes itself in a lower substance by a limited operation of form, that is what we call intellect. Interesting. What intellect does in the domain of finite pieces, the true supermind does in the domain of infinity and oneness. But the function is similar. Extraordinary men are able to aid the action of sense mind and the buddhi proper, intelligent will, by the vijnanam acting in the intelligence indeed, and so out of its proper sphere, but in its own form as ideal consciousness. So something of the higher, outside its domain, but in its form here working. That would be the intuition. Making what is called genius. Pratibhanam, a reflection or luminous response in the mind to higher ideation. So that would be the intuitive working. The yogin goes beyond to the Vijnanam itself. Or if he is one of the greatest rishis like Yajnavalkya, to the Ananda of the Sachidananda. None in ordinary times goes beyond the Ananda in the waking state, etc. So he just describes how this whole thing is operating, the whole rationale behind. And then he will come back to Agni. So why Agni? Why is Agni so important? What is his function? What does he do? So we'll see again. I'll read a portion. In man as he is presently developed, the intelligent mind is the most important psychological faculty. And it is with a view to the development of the intelligent mind to its highest purity and capacity that the hymns of the Veda are written. In this mind there are successively the following principles. So a finer grade of matter, finer grade of life force, finer grade of mind, and so on. So he describes the 7 gradations within mind itself. And he discusses all that. Again, I'm skipping. But you see here the profound rationale behind. And now we come to Agni. Agni in the sphere of material energies is the master of Tejas. Tejas could be translated as intensity, luminous intensity of force. The third and central material principle in the 5 known to Vedic science. That is the third element, what we call fire element. Tejas itself is of 7 kinds, and he describes the whole rationale. Now this part I'm going to, there's a lot of Sanskrit words. He describes each of those gradations of the fire principle on different planes of consciousness. And then one of them is let's just read. Don't worry if there's a lot of Sanskrit terminology, try to get the sense of it. This is so important, and it will end with something which will blow your mind. So that's the reason I'm reading this. So, Tejas is of 7 kinds. Chaya, or negative luminosity, which is the principle of the material sheath, Annakosha. It is only in the physical world that you have this thing called shadow, no other worlds. So, shadow is the negative operation of the fire principle. Okay. Next. Twilight or dosha, the basis of the prana, being Tejas modified by the shadow. Tejas proper or simple clarity and effulgence, dry light, which is the basis of the mind sheath. Jyoti or solar light, brilliance, which is the basis of the Vijnana, supermind. Agni or fiery light, which is the basis of the Chit, of the Sachidananda. Vidyut or electrical illumination, which is the basis of the Ananda Sheath. And Prakasha, which is the basis of the Sat. So there are 7 terms used which describe the operation of Agni on the 7 levels. Each of the 7 has its own appropriate energy. For the energy is the essential reality and the light only a characteristic accompaniment of the energy. Now you'll notice when he is describing all this, deep within you there will be a resonance with your knowledge of physics or electricity or experiences of physical world. And there's a good reason, as you will see, and that will blow your mind. Of all these, Agni is the greatest in this world, greater even than Vidyut, which is of the domain of Ananda. Although the god of the Vidyut energy is Vishnu himself, who is the lord of Ananda. Vaidyato Manavah, electrical man of the Upanishads. In the Vijnana, Surya as well as Vishnu is greater than Agni. But here, he and Vishnu both work under the dominant energy of Agni. So this is a brilliant insight on across all the planes there are deities dominating as aspects or powers. While they are greater there in their world, in this domain, Agni is the dominant theme and all the others have to serve him, under him. So, here he, Vishnu, Surya and Vishnu, both work under the dominant energy of Agni and for the satisfaction of Indra, mind. Vishnu in the Upanishads being younger than Indra. Why? Because he is operating not in his home but in the home of the other. Translated into the language of physics. Now let this blow your mind. This means that Agni, commanding as he does heat and cold, is the fundamental active energy behind all phenomena of light and heat. The sun, physical sun, is merely a reservoir of light and heat. The peculiar luminous blaze of the sun being only one form of tejas. And what we call sunlight is composed of the static energy of prakasha or essential light, which is the basis of satkosha. The electrical energy or vaidyutam and the tejas of Agni modified by the nature of Surya and determining all other forms of light. So it's a complex description, unfortunately a little technical, but he's showing how this modifies all the other gradations that go through it and build for the current physical experience that we have of the sun and the light and the electricity. The prakasha and vaidyutam can only become active when they enter into Agni and work under the conditions of his being. And Agni himself is the supplier of Surya. He creates Jyoti, he creates Tejas, he creates negatively Chaya, shadow. You see, Agni is the master of this domain, all those he controls and modifies, operates through them. Right or wrong, this is the physics of the Veda. Boom. Sri Aurobindo just revealed to you a glimpse of a complex, highly developed science, physics. He's talking about material world, physics, but in a science which spans across domains, of which a domain of operation in the physical world is taken up and described and elaborated upon. If you were to dwell on what those deities are, again, what is Surya and what is Prakasha, what is Vaidyutam, you'll have to really go into the physical representation of it. You will get the fullness of the physics, but still you will recognize they are actually a physical representation of something which belongs to that world and each of those worlds. So how the 7 worlds are actually operating, or the principles of the 7 worlds, or Agni's luminosity in those 7 worlds is operating here in this dominating power of Agni in matter, and you have the physics, which is describing the operations of the sun, sunlight, etc. Now one of the things you notice, and I won't go into the technicality of it, he's speaking of the electrical energy in the sun and the static energy of the sunlight. This electrical energy, We find increasingly, as you study the working of the sun today, we don't understand how the sun works. First they told you it was nuclear explosions. That was the most stupid and reductionist physics ever, because it just doesn't make sense if you go deep enough. Now that we have more complex observations of the sun, nobody talks of nuclear energy. They talk of electrical energy. And what do we see? The surface of the sun is some 3,400 or 4,000 degrees Celsius. You get off the surface into the corona around, you hit 3 million degrees. The 3 million does not go back to the surface. It doesn't heat the surface. The surface remains always 3,000, 4,000 degrees. Material emerging from the surface going into the corona around heats up to 3 million degrees. And from there blows out intensely what we call the solar wind, which continuously is pumping out matter all across into the solar system and beyond, and holds like a sheath, a protective layer of the solar system. And this wind hitting different planets is substantial. It is protons. Combining with electricity on the planet now becomes new hydrogen. And the hydrogen combines with the oxygen on the planets to make water. Every planet has water because of the solar wind building water all the time. I'm digressing. We're focusing on the sun. From this 3,000 to 3 million degrees leap, we don't understand. What we do observe is, on the sun, and it's all linked to sunspots, which are like special focal points, you get these gigantic bands of magnetic loops. Gigantic streams of lightning flowing along these gigantic loops. Gigantic meaning a loop like this, of this size, the earth would be this little piece. It could be blown away by a single burst of that loop. And these loops form, emerge, collapse, form, emerge, entangle, and every now and then they break. So strong magnetic loop suddenly breaks and disconnects, snaps back or joins with another, and at that point is a gigantic release of energy through the magnetism and the electricity. And that is the only explanation till now that we have of this heating up that's taking place in that layer around. Shooting in heat and then building this intensity of the continuous bursting out of the solar wind. And when we look carefully at those things we call the patches that are those dark spots, sunspots we say, when we look closely enough, it looks as if they are hollow and they are looking inside, and inside it's dark. What is the sun really? And when we observe carefully, it is the most perfect sphere you could have. I think it is off spherically by less than 1 to 10,000 in proportion. We can't even make out that it's off slightly. If it was just a lump of mass of liquid or solid, it would be lumpy. It would not be a perfect sphere. It's almost gaseous. So all this is just blowing away all the past understanding of the sun. But when you read the text like this, you suddenly say, oh my God, here is a physics that's hinting at this operation of the electrical energies, the pure essential light, and the sunlight composed of the static energy of Prakasha. And it cannot be activated except by the modification by Agni. And everything is just revealed to you like that. And he says, right or wrong, this is the physics of the Veda. And then he leaves it aside. Too much for most people, no problem, humanity will eventually catch up. But then he takes one more step, and again, please let this blow your mind. This description we had of the Veda, he then translated in terms of physics. Now he translates psychologically. Translated into the language of psychology, it means that in the intelligent mind which now predominates, neither Jnanam, the higher knowledge, nor Ananda, the divine bliss, can be fully developed, though essentially superior to mind. Not even Soma, the rational buddhi, can really govern. But it is Indra full of Soma, the understanding based on the senses and strengthened by the buddhi, who is supreme, and for whose action Soma, Surya, Agni, and even Supreme Vishnu work. Fascinating. In our mind, and the higher understanding based on the senses and strengthened by the buddhi. So there's a profound relationship between these functional operations, and there is a domination. You cannot in this mind have those things operating directly. They have to operate under the subjugation or dominance of this primary principle. And the implications this has in the nature of the working of mind, in the nature of the potential of the mind and the evolution of the mind. And it's not just on a mechanical level, each of these is a conscious being. There are cosmic forces operating in the universe. And they are operating in your mind now. And these are the conditions for their right working. And this knowledge is held in those verses of the Veda. Not only they describe the working in their divine domain, they are working on the physical domain as the physics of the Veda. They are working in the psychological domain within us in their interrelation and interdependencies. And so in the Veda, when for example there is this colloquy of Agastya, Agastya wants to move ahead from the mind to the higher grade. Indra stops him and challenges him and says, you cannot go further unless you fulfill these conditions. And there's a whole colloquy between them, which leads eventually to the progress. The content of that colloquy describes to you the conditions and requirements and the stages and processes even of that evolution. So in this is a description which on a very superficial level you will say it's a conversation and it's an allegory, it's a narrative. No, it's a literal description of an interaction that takes place when you go to the root level. It's a literal description of the interaction that takes place between these powers operating in us, cosmic powers, and the actual psychological process of our evolution. But at the same time, it is a literal description of those same cosmic powers operating within the physical world and in physical processes as physics and chemistry and leading to biology. And then he concludes from here, as a consequence of this description, the reason on which man prides himself is merely a link in the evolution from the manas to the vijnanam, from the sense mind to the supermind, and must serve either the senses or the ideal cognition. And this is a very interesting point Sri Aurobindo makes in the synthesis of yoga, but here it is done with the rationale of the Vedic logic and the Vedic description, that the sense mind in itself cannot exist and operate freely. It must serve the senses or the higher ideal. It must serve one of these. It cannot exist, live or operate by itself. If you leave it to operate by itself, okay, he describes this. If it tries to work for itself, it only leads to universal agnosticism, philosophic doubt, and the arrest of all knowledge. And this is what you find so prided upon in certain modern philosophies, particularly in the West, where they'll say, I'm an existentialist, I'm an agnostic, and by mere wordplay, you question anything and lead it to reductionist doubt. How can you prove this? You can never prove it, therefore you can never know, and it becomes pointless. Why? Because this faculty in itself serves no point. It must serve either an inferior master or a superior master. Now, if you just dwell on this one idea, it has such profound psychological implications. Why are you lost? Why are you confused? Because your power of this grade that you're operating in does not turn to serve either an inferior or a greater truth. So you see a part of humanity serve an inferior truth. Oh, I feel pleasure in this, therefore I will chase after it. This gives me momentary satisfaction, I chase after it. Then you're happy, isn't it? People who chase after, at least for a while, they're happy. Oh, I had my satisfaction. Eventually they outgrow it, then they're unhappy. When they're unhappy, again they disengage. But unless they turn up to a higher source to fulfill, your life is purposeless, meaningless, hollow, empty. You must find that higher link. And when you serve that, then you have naturally the higher filling and the highest fulfillment. So, we continue with the text and will complete for today. It must not be thought that the Veda uses these names merely as personifications of psychological and physical forces. This is the error they will make. They'll say, oh yes, they saw this force. They treated it like it's a god or an independent being. No, it's not that. It's actually the reverse. It regards these gods as realities, standing behind the psychological and physical operation. That even what we call physical energy is supported by and is an operation of one of these deities. So he explains, since no energy can conduct itself, but all need some conscious center or centers from or through which they proceed. Very important. Again, it's an insight of physics, and it just changes your understanding of physics. You need a focal point on or through which the energy has to operate and proceed, and it has to be a conscious focal point. Now you think about the implications in physics. Look at the processes of physics. Look at what makes for conversion of energy from this to that. They keep telling you in your textbooks, this was potential energy, it became electrical energy. This was heat energy, it became potential energy, or from potential went to heat, or whatever. How does this become that? No logic. Oh, something happens here and it converts. That's all the physics you were taught. By this mechanism, potential energy becomes heat. By that mechanism, heat energy becomes kinetic energy. How? That's how it is. What is this mechanism? That's your conscious focal center. Suddenly your entire physics shifts, and it's earth-shaking. I personally have dwelt on this and part of the other texts of which this is a part. And I think I shared once that when I first discovered this text of the first trick of the Rig Veda, of course it's scattered across these 2 or 3 articles, it was so mind-blowing. I would meditate, dwell on a few lines for half an hour, 1 hour at a time, 1.5 hours. Come back the next day and reread, and then it would be internalized a little more, and reread. Over a few weeks, I had covered 2 or 3 pages, and still it was wow. And this part, which is the physics, I know it's accessible because he's giving you all the clues, he's describing what are those deities, what are their functions, but it needs a deeper entry into this. And it will be necessarily a semi-intuitive entry. It can't be purely rational. You have to feel what the deities are and their relationship and hold this in yourself. And then you'll say, yes, in my mind now I can feel this working of Agni, Surya, Vayu, Vishnu, Soma, etc. You'll feel it like that or perceive it like that. And even in the physics you will perceive, that's what it is. So, and then he completes, a doubt will naturally arise. How Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, can be Upendra of the Vedas. That is, he works under Indra, subjugated to Indra or assistant to Indra. The answer is that whatever energy is of supreme importance at a particular stage of the evolution is taken up by Vishnu Virat as his special care. We have seen that now that the Ananda is now highest in the developed evolution, Vishnu is therefore now preeminently the Lord of Ananda. And when he comes down into the material world, he stands in the sun as the supreme electrical force involved in Agni and evolving out of him, which is the physical counterpart of Ananda, and without which no action in the world can proceed. There he's telling you what's happening in the sun. This whole electrical process he's describing to you, but as these conscious operations of conscious cosmic powers and deities which span across worlds. What is this operation of the sun? And you have to recognize it as a divine operation. It's not a purely physical operation. But this is the relationship of these deities working in the sun, which when you approach through the reductionist, blinded microscope, telescope, electrical field measurements, you will translate into those terms. But you will never explain why this causes that until you see that behind it is a conscious chosen relationship. He is not inferior, he only subordinates himself, pretending to serve while really by service he commands. So Vishnu enters the domain now. Through service he commands and directs the whole operation as a subordinate. Is one of his workings. At the same time, he's also working from above, and so on. So this is one of those very extraordinary texts which is mind-blowing. And then from this he goes into the elaboration of Agni. And maybe I'll just finish this. Agni therefore is master of Tejas, especially fiery Tejas, and the agent of the tapas, sahaituka tapas, the intense focused concentration in the mind. In the language of modern psychology, this sahaituka tapas is will in action, not desire. So the mind's will, not desire, but will embracing desire and exceeding it. It is not even choice, wish, or intention. Will in the Vedic idea is essentially knowledge taking the form of force. This is what I know, and this now turns into action. I intuitively glimpse this higher possibility, and this glimpse and the knowledge of this glimpsing now turns into action with a concentration. That's this pure will. Agni, therefore, is pure mental force necessary to all concentration. Once we perceive this Vedic conception, we realize the immense importance of Agni and are in a position to understand the hymn we are studying. And so this is a different article where he again goes through all the etymology of the first Rig of the Rig Veda. And again we will just dwell on this. He elaborates on the meaning of even the Ratnadhatamam, disposer of delight, and so on. So again we will dwell on the first Rig of the Rig Veda, dwell on the meaning, and concentrate on this. Allow it to settle within you in a more intuitive sense with this study. Agni I adore, who stands before the Lord, the God who seeth truth, the warrior, strong dispenser of delight. But now you go back to the more intuitive etymological poise. The divine existence, pure, bare, moving gently, lovingly to press forward. I yearn for, I love, I adore. Who stands before this gigantic working of the divine Lord in the evolutionary movement, unfolding, revealing, pouring out as yajna. And Agni stands before this. Who knows is the play of luminosity, who goes directly to the truth, knows the truth, expresses the truth. With force, warrior, breaking obstacles, removing difficulties, takes you straight by the straight path, the direct route, and organizes, establishes most perfectly the divine bliss, the Satchidananda. And now you place within us individually Agni as this pure force of mind, which is the will of mind. And we chant Agnimire purohitam yajnasya devam ritvijam hotaram ratnadhatamam. We'll meditate on this for a few moments. In the mind, it is the mind, will and force, but from a pure essential way, we will identify Agni as the psychic aspiration and the psychic luminosity and will, and take it in that way for the larger working of the integral yoga and the nature of the yoga itself, and then it makes a more complete sense. So this will be what you may dwell upon. If you like, those of you who like, think about it, dwell upon it, read and repeat in your mind until it assimilates in almost an intuitive way the full sense of the first rig of the Rig Veda. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you.